In Amazon's blockbuster action satire The Boys, superheroes are revered as godlike celebrities while vigilantes band together to take them down. I'm Rob LeCouria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby. I'm here with Laura Jean Shannon, who is the costume designer extraordinaire for The Boys. So many costumes to look at, so little time. I want to start with this. Like the first question that anyone I think would ask you is that the main celebrity superheroes, the seven, I imagine so much of your energy has been focused on those because you've got to, skewer the familiar Marvel DC look, but you've got to bring something new and fresh to it. So can you talk us through the challenges of how you came up with the looks for each of them?
Absolutely. Yes, in fact, I am the super suits designer and I collaborate with costume designers for each season that do the rest of the show. And in fact, end up doing some super suits as well for our day players. So my main focus when we first started our show was in fact the seven and the superheroes, the iconic sort of superheroes that they were meant to embody. And one of the things that was really important to our showrunner, Eric Kripke, and our executive producers, Seth Rogen, Evan Goldberg, we really wanted to create a legitimate superhero universe, one that could play with the big boys, if you will, So we've basically become the co-architects of the VOT cinematic universe over the course of several seasons. And when we jumped into it in the beginning of our process, we wanted to really, like you said, tap into the kind of ethos of, what superheroes evoke. So we wanted like evocative sort of characters that were driven by some of the very classic, superheroes of our time in other universes, but put our own spin on it. So we started with the books, The Boys by Garth Ennis. And the characters there gave us a lot of, kind of DNA that we could infuse into our versions of the characters. But we really did veer off of what was in the books with some of the characters and then held very fast and true to what some of them looked like as well, depending on what our specific story and our specific characters required. So for instance, with Homelander, he's very true to the books in terms of his color scheme, in terms of being, a very muscle-bound superhero, having the cape that effectively is an American flag. And then we really leaned into his iconography of the Eagles, but we put our own little spin, our little spin. We leaned into the Eagles, but we put our own little spin, our own little bend on it, where the Eagles are sort of more fascist when you start to get to know the character and he really starts to show his true colors. You go, oh, wait a second, he's this all-American hero, but is he? Then we've got the Deep, who's very much different from what he looked like in the books, because we have Chase Crawford playing him, who's beautiful to look at, and we wanted to show him so he doesn't wear the giant helmet in the books, and instead we leaned very much into sort of aquatic, streamlined character. Really what we wanted to focus on was dialing in this sort of upgraded cinematic aesthetic. So all of the fabrics are custom made. All of the unconventional materials are sculpted specifically for each of the characters. And it's all integrated to, have a very cohesive superhero feel and vibe that isn't a farce, that isn't a whim. They're not the joke. They're actually legit, and the universe that we create is legit. And in so doing, everything is grounded. Everything has a science base to it. The A-Train suit being a speedster, for instance, we created out of technology that leans into aerodynamic qualities. We studied things like golf balls that fly through the air with less drag because of the divots on the surface of them. So we really wanted to harness, the sort of grounded reality that our show embodies, so that the superheroes could live among the normal human beings on Earth in our story, and we could tell the stories that we tell that are as impactful as they are.
Yeah. for the untrained eye, many of us may not have fully appreciated how sincere the look and feel of this show is. It is not like the style of the show is satirical, absolutely skewers the whole genre, but the costumes, for example, and the sets are absolutely true, like and genuine. That's really important to get to really hit home how we're watching a world that could be could be the world that we live in, but it's not. A big factor, I think, as well, which I'd love to explore further, is how the look and feel of the show is so macho and patriotic, as you mentioned, and slightly fascistic. And there's a few parallels to the kind of propaganda that we saw in American politics, even recently and even now. How much of that aesthetic has it informed a particular costume, particularly Homelander, surely?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, no, we definitely, walk that tightrope a bit. We teeter precariously on the precipice of not going over the edge, of leaning too far into iconography that's too spot on, too on the nose. But we do try to, hide Easter eggs and bake them into the designs, and, really weave literally into the fabric, little visual nuances that will, give the audience layers that they can actually, kind of recognize over the course of their viewing. For instance, on Homelander, his fabric itself, much to my team's chagrin, I forced them to use a stretch twill, which is not customarily what you use for a super suit because it's not as stretchy as a lot of stretch fabrics. But it was really important to us that we create a uniform, something that felt very, very militaristic. So it just gives you this immediate sort of like gravitas, this immediate kind of, message that this guy is a serious and, sort of general that you don't want to mess with. And then on that fabric, we created a repeat of eagles in high density screen printed fabric to have it feel like it's a tactical fabric and that there's some sort of, use for it in terms of being protective. And the way that we did it was we took eagles that were from times in history and regimes in history that aren't American and that are fascist. And we were understated with it enough that actually I like to tell this story that when we were at our camera tests, we had been shooting all day long, and one of the other actors looked at Anthony wearing the suit and went, "Oh my gosh, that's eagles. I didn't even notice that." And then they couldn't unsee it, because if we're doing our job right, then what we're doing is we're creating layers like that where it might appear to be one thing on the surface, but as you dive in a little deeper, you start noticing all of these little hints that we've baked into the design. And so, if we're lucky, those things start being noticed as the, action sort of unfolds and as the characters start presenting themselves.
Like, you realize now, as soon as I take a break today, I'm going downstairs to put on the boys to look up for the eagles. It's just going to be my main thing for the day. Speaking of fascism, season 2, there was some new looks that you had to design, particularly, for Aya Cash's character. So talk us through that, because it must be exciting, and I know with season 3 in production to be given free reign to start designing new looks as well, right?
Absolutely, and that's a great character to highlight, actually. First of all, I just have to say Aya's just such a great creative partner. She really jumped right in with us and was so excited to explore being a Nazi. And I love watching her, in her interviews talking about how when she was a young Jewish girl, she never would have thought that she would have been playing a Nazi when she grew up. But, with that character in the books, this is another great example of Stormfront was a male character in the graphic novels. And so we really sort of turned that on its ear by casting Aya to play a female version of Stormfront. And it was such a genius move by the the team, the creative team, to make that choice. First of all, to have it be Aya, who's again brilliant, but also just to open up this new possibility to this character of diving into her from a different perspective. Really, the one thing that we retained was this color scheme from the books. And there are some deconstructed visual references in the fabric of her suit as well that do hint at the character's roots, and that also have a relationship to the character in the books. But otherwise, it was sort of, clean slate. Let's do this great, really strong female character who's full of twists and turns and surprises. And so she's also ancient and, spoilers. So we did a lot of battle scarring and, really laid into aging and distress on her suit to show sort of a history to the character.
Okay, yeah, that did give her a lot of dimension. I noticed a bit of that as well. With costume designers and the head of costume departments and so forth, I always wonder how they balance aesthetic and practical. So, and you even mentioned utility, because that's a different thing. That's for the characters, it's themselves and that utility. But do you find it's difficult to strike a balance for the actors so that they're practical and functional, and yet they're also aesthetically so beautiful?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And while you asked it, I have 900 text messages coming because I'm establishing a superhero on one of my shows. Please stand by for 2 seconds. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
This is being taped, right?
Yeah, we can edit.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay. All the stuff. Source and follow. Some crazy shit going on in my world, brother.
Oh my God. That's going to be my final question.
Okay.
So you
established. That was for Doom Patrol.
Oh, yes.
So, yeah, Robert, that's an awesome question. And it's one that that you framed really beautifully, actually, because you're so right. It's sort of a trifecta of, reality and, form and function. So what comes first, function has to actually lead form, in fact, when we're doing a show like The Boys, because it's a practical show where these actors are practically wearing these suits, practically doing action. And then you have that third little, box that you just ticked, which was, how it speaks to the actual character and how it plays into, kind of what we're trying to embody in like the message we're sending of the tactical quality of the suits for the character. So I always joke that our suits play super suits on TV, but really they're just an amalgam of these like highly engineered custom fabrics and, unconventional materials that we mash together to create this suit that then sees all this action and gets all this wear, and my set team has to then fix it in between, the various battle sequences. And you've watched our show also deal with the bloodbaths and the, shredding and the dirty bombs and all of the whales, all the crazy stuff that our guys and gals come up with in the writer's room. So, it really is a balance, and it's one that's important because they have to look cool. They have to have the right vibe for the character, but also they need to be able to be practically worn. So I'm constantly in there. I'm sure you can find some footage of me with the actors, throwing punches and throwing kicks and, working together physically to make sure that, everything can move, everything actually functions, while also making sure that, proportionally speaking, we've, situated it just right for the suit to have some impact visually.
Yeah, it would just really not make any sense for the viewer if it didn't work so practically, and if there wasn't utility. Remember, everybody watching this, these suits are made by the Vought Corporation. They're corporate as well as being superheroes and otherworldly, and so all of that stuff's got to play into how you design these things. It sounds so complicated. I'm actually getting exhausted just saying it.
Well, that's a great point, and that is actually one of the things that sort of holds the superheroes on this show apart from others on other shows, which is, you're right, they are they're merchandise, they are corporate, they are branded, and they are all about the bottom line, and the monetary aspect to the designs and how we brand them alongside Vought, and how we give thought to the technologies that Vought would have available to them in the real grounded world, because they actually aren't otherworldly. So unlike other universes, these aren't meta-humans because of any kind of sort of out there situation. This is a man-made actual spoilers again. It's a man-made superpower that each of our soups embodies, and so it's all tied up together, and really is something that we give a lot of thought to, which each of these designs, it's something that we give a lot of thought to with each of these designs, which is that what would Vought do? WWVD, how would they put their stamp on this character? And a great thing that we could look at that is a perfect example is when Starlight comes to the Seven, and she's really pure of heart, and genuine and authentic in her desire to save the world, and she's in her little sweet country super suit where there's some upgraded fabric that they spent their whole budget on, and then they went to Joann's Fabric and got some filler stuff to round it out. And she arrives at the Seven, and they unveil her new super suit, and it's basically, for all intents and purposes, this highly sexualized, upgraded bathing suit.
Yeah.
And that's a very poignant moment, where we really see the true kind of underbelly of Vought and their branding, and how it reflects on the designs of the soups.
Yeah, and how it's so true to the real world that we live in, where everything is commoditized and
yes.
capitalism reigns. My final question is about you more generally. You've worked on classics in the genre. This is a genre that many of us hold very close to our hearts, right? I could watch Marvel movies pretty much all day. That's just me. And that's why I love The Boys and Invincible and all these great shows in the genre. So how does one like yourself how do you become a super suit specialist? Like, we're going to do a superhero thing. Let's call LJ. She will show us the way. How does that happen?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, here's the thing. I think that I've always in my heart and soul been inclined to being the type of designer and artist who specializes in superhero suits. And sort of my life in general, the trajectory of my life has kind of led me to this path, starting with when I was a little kid, and my brother and I, went and saw Star Wars in the theaters 16 times, and I had my parents get me every art book they could get their hands on, and I poured over the costume design and the creature design and the production design, and always was just really taken with comic books. And I mean, when I say Saturday morning cartoons and the Justice League and every other superhero cartoon I could get my hands on was something that I did every Saturday. I mean, from when I was like 6 to when I was like 46. So it's just something that's always been very exciting to me. And I also was an athlete growing up, so I was a martial artist, and I love moving my body, and that feeling you get, that rush that you get of being able to feel invincible in that way. And then I designed lots of different genre films, including some superhero films. And I wanted to get a broad base of knowledge so that I could really be limber in my craft and be able to kind of do anything design wise. But really my end goal was always to be able to do things unconventional and design things from the ground up and really, sort of hatch that seed that can grow into something unique. And what I love about what I do is it's a collaborative art form. So I get to collaborate with our creative partners on each of our shows, our showrunners, our executive producers, our directors. And then I have my amazing team, my concept artists, my assistant costume designer, supervisors, costumers, manufacturing foreperson, seamstresses, tailors, creative character engineering, who does all of our sculpted elements, and honestly, and then a team of 8 people on each of our shows. So there's about 150 people right now working on all of our 8 shows at any given time. And it really has become a family. And what I love is that we all take the challenge really seriously, that each of our characters has their own visual voice and their own, technology in terms of the build, and each show has their own visual voice. So I guess that's my kind of long-winded way of saying this is a path that I feel like I've always been on, and I've now landed in my natural sort of progressive step of being able to really walk that path.
Yeah, what a dream. And
oh, and I forgot to say, I was also I was a sculpture major in college, and I was a model maker. So I actually have the physical capacity to build these unconventional aspects, materials as well. So like that combined with my athleticism of my youth, and then, my design aesthetic, and then what just kind of creatively, pumps me up. It's sort of a marriage of all of those things.
Now you get to do what you love, which is such a rare thing. So on that note, LJ, thank you for your time today, and congrats on a really strong season 2. I know season 3 is coming, and we're all dying to see it.
It's so good. Please do tune in, because you will not be disappointed. Thank you, Robert.